Hi folks! Okay, right now this video is going to hopefully share some insight about intervals, musical intervals. Intervals can be a little bit nerve-wracking, but rest assured they don't have to be so nerve-wracking, especially not the way that maybe some of your text is presenting it. So let me just show you a little bit of the nuts and bolts on what intervals are and how to figure out an interval when you look at them in your music. Basically, an interval is just the distance between one note and another note. Okay, so if I were going to play it on a piano, you can hear that the interval goes up, the distance, it leaps, the music leaps up. Okay, or it can go down. And you can have a whole bunch of different intervals. Those are all examples of intervals. When you're looking at your music though, there are specific names for all of your intervals. So first let me show you, just to remind you, that an interval is just the distance between your notes. High to low, low to high. Doesn't really matter to me how you think of it, but you have to know that it means the distance. So how do you figure out your interval? Well, step one is to figure out what the number of your interval is. So let me give you a for example. Let's draw the staff. And we'll say for our purposes we're not going to put the clef here because that'll be confusing. It might show up backwards on the camera, so I don't want to do that to you. But we have to figure out the number of our interval. So here is one note, and here is another note. Okay, so we have one note here and one note here, and we have to figure out the distance between this note and the other note. Well, how do we do that? Well, we start with the top or the bottom, your choice, and we count the number of times we have to get to the next note. So we start here, for example. Let's start down here. We say this is number one. I tap on it on the line. Number one, number two, number three, number four, number five. So I had to count to number 5 to get from here to here. Let me show you again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I tapped on the note and then I kept tapping up on all of the lines and spaces till I got to the next note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is a fifth of some sort, and that's backwards. So I'm not going to write it there, but that is a fifth of some sort. Okay, what kind of fifth is it? Well, let's figure this out. Now we have to decide, is it a perfect fifth or is it an augmented or diminished fifth? Okay, now that you know how many half steps are in between certain notes and you know what half steps are, you have to know that a perfect fifth means that there are 7 half steps from one note to the next. Okay, let's call this note G, and let's call this one D. Here's your D. Oh, can I do this? Here is your G. Okay, a little backwards. Here is your G and here is your D. So now we have to count how many half steps are in between G and D. Well, I'm looking at my piano. So from G to G sharp is 1. Then from G sharp to A is 2. Then from A to B flat is 3. B flat to B is 4. B to C is 5. C to C sharp is 6. And C sharp to D is 7. So there are 7 half steps between G and D. And if you look at your book, 7 half steps, when it is a fifth, means that your interval here would actually be a perfect fifth. Okay, so that is how you come up with a perfect fifth. Perfect fifth. Okay, so that is how you figure out those intervals. You have to know that there are different steps for every single one. If you have, for example, a second, the interval of a second, Let me show you that. You have to figure out, is it a major second or a minor second? Okay. Let's call this one E. Right? We're still pretending like we're in treble clef. And let's call this one F. Okay. So here is a second. I know this is a second because I do the tap technique. I tap once on E, tap, that's one, and I tap up to the very next note, F. They're cousins, they're right next to each other, they're second. There's a second difference between them. So the interval is the interval of a 2. Okay, so we know that it's a second of some sort. If it's a major second, it will take 2 half steps to get from E to F. If it is a minor second, it will only take 1 half step from E to F. And if you look at your piano and you start on E, it takes me 1 half step to go from E to F. E to F is only 1 half step, which means it's a minor second. If, for example, I changed it and I put in F sharp here, E to F sharp, well now we have a major second because we have E, and E goes to F, which is a half step, but now we have to go F to F sharp. So that is 2 half steps, which make it a major second. Hopefully this is making sense to you. So step 1 is always figure out what the number is for the interval. Step 2 is figure out, is it major? Is it minor? Is it augmented? Is it diminished? Okay. A couple of more things just to remember as you're working through this homework assignment. You have to know that there is no such thing as a minor fourth or a minor fifth. There's no such thing as a major fourth or a major fifth. It is either perfect fourth or perfect fifth or augmented fourth or augmented fifth or diminished fourth or diminished fifth. Okay, so if you have a perfect fourth, which is 5 half steps, but then you add 1 more half step into the mix, you make it a fourth, but now this fourth has 6 half steps, well now you are an augmented fourth. It is not called major, it's called augmented. Okay, let me give you a for example right here. Okay, here we'll have our C. Okay, that's middle C. Okay, if I were going to do a perfect fourth distance between C and something else, I would do C to F. That is a perfect fourth. Okay, because that has 5 half steps. So it's still a fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how I know it's a fourth. I did the tap technique. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect fourth. Okay, but now I'm going to make it bigger than a perfect fourth. I'm going to make this F sharp. So now it is not a perfect fourth anymore. Now I've added 1 half step, which means now it is an augmented fourth. Okay, I can go ahead and change it one more time. And instead of doing a sharp, I did a flat. Now it's not a perfect fourth anymore still. Now I've made it smaller than a perfect fourth. I've made it smaller because I flatted F. I made it F flat, which really we know is E. So now it is a diminished fourth. Diminished, smaller. Augmented, larger. Okay, so just to recap, you can have majors, you can have minors, you can have perfects, you can have augmented, you can have diminished. It's really important to figure out the number of the interval first. Is it a second? Is it a third? Is it a fourth? Figure out the number first and then go back and try to figure out if it's major, minor, augmented, or diminished. Hopefully this has helped you out a little bit, and I look forward to any questions that you might have.